Francis founded, back at John Brown University, a publishing house that he calls Kharis Publications. And a number of years ago, when I was still at IVP, shortly after he transitioned from Arkansas to Wheaton College, where he now teaches chemistry, he called and asked if Dan Cook from Crossway, I don't know if Dan is here or not, but he called and said, would you mind getting together with me? I have questions. And I was still at IVP at the time, not at ECPA, but Dan and I served on the ECPA board, and I said, I would welcome that. And thus, Francis and I began meeting, sometimes with Dan, sometimes without, at a cafe called The Patio. And a friendship arose out of that. And I wanted to introduce you to him because he's celebrating his 10-year anniversary. And a lot of startups, like you were in Arkansas 10 years ago, don't make it to 10. And I just felt like it was something to celebrate. But the second thing is, I feel like what Francis has done as he joined into ECPA as a member, as he sought out Dan and I to be in community with him, I thought it was an example of what ECPA can and should do for small press members. And so I wanted just to give Francis a moment to share with you something about Kharis and about his affiliation with ECPA as we honor and recognize your 10 years, brother. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jeff. The message that John received when he was on the island of Patmos, writing a book, Everything You See, and send it to the 7 churches. That has been, from the onset, what we took very seriously at Kharis Publishing. And some of you are wondering, what does a chemist have to do with a publishing company? It's a long story. If you want to know, I'm glad to share it anytime during the course of these meetings. But that journey, it's just God's grace and mercy, and the people that He has brought alongside me. And so I want to thank God for His grace, but I also want to acknowledge some of these people. Like Jeff mentioned, this journey started at John Brown University. So when I settled down there as a professor, when I wanted to give back, the short of it was that literacy played a huge role in my life. I grew up in this small village in the southeast of Nigeria. There was no public library, but I had, fortunate enough to have 1 or 2 people who had gone on to university, traveled abroad, had some decent library, and they just took interest in me, and that shaped my life. And so when I settled in the academia, I wanted to give back. The short of it is that we decided to give back in both ways, both as a publisher, but also in sending what we call mini libraries to orphanages in very poor countries. Orphanages that don't have any libraries at all, or any books or school. And so we've done 6 of that, and that's been part of the joy of what we've done so far. And so the president of John Brown University, Charles Pollard, people like Jake Stratman, the English professor at that time, Makweda Smith, the communications professor at that time, Trisha Posey, who was the history professor, and some of the early volunteers as our editors at that time, they just gathered around. And so it took off not because of me, but because of all of these people and the grace of God. And so when we moved, about 4 years later, I accepted a position at Wheaton College. I was a little worried. I didn't know how I was going to survive this new project. And I wanted to join ECPA, but I couldn't because there was this requirement: you have to have somebody from ECPA write a recommendation. Believe it or not, I knew nobody who was a voting member of ECPA. So I just emailed the ECPA office and said, this is my situation, I want to join. And they, gave me the contact for Jeff and Dan. And I reached out to them. And so ECPA has been a major part of our journey, not just as Dan and Jeff have come alongside me. But just being here, seeing all of you, hearing your stories, and just encouraging people like us that this can be done, as challenging as it is. So I really want to thank you from my heart. In fact, even in our position, ECPA has been a very great benefit and blessing to us. So thank you all, and God bless.